I'll go first then. Why did you choose a career in mental health? Oh, she's back. Can
Nope.
we hear him?
Still muted. There we go.
Yay!
You have earned the right to go first.
Go first. So I always knew I wanted to go into the mental health field. I remember when I was in the 8th grade, I wrote down a list of goals for myself, and one of the goals was to be a psychologist. Never encountered a psychologist in my life, never, had to deal with any social workers or, other mental health providers. It was just something that came to me, and it was just a goal that I wrote down, and then here I am. So I remember, like, when I was at F&M, I was kind of on the path of going towards like medical school. So I was interested in going the path of psychiatry, but unfortunately I didn't do well in chemistry. So I ended up, having to withdraw from that particular class. And so I just kind of went the route of like majoring in psychology while I was at F&M. And from there, I took some time off to get some work experience, and then I ended up applying for graduate schools maybe like two years after I graduated from F&M. So that's kind of what my path was. I don't know who wants to go next.
I'll go next. I came to mental health somewhat late in my career. So when I was at F&M, I was a biochemistry and molecular biology major. And when I first got to F&M, Sharice will attest to this, I was interested in like environmental studies and geology, and I wanted to be a botanist actually. So that's why I was really taking classes. I did very poorly in Gen Chem 1. I got a D, and that was really upsetting to me. And I kind of felt like it was the teacher's fault. So I approached the Gen Chem 2 teacher and I was like, listen, we're gonna work this out. We're gonna meet on a regular basis and I'm gonna do better, because I wanted to be a scientist, right? So I had to kind of get through chemistry. That worked out really well. And I ended up doing pretty well in chemistry and making that my focus. I got a PhD in chemistry from UVA. And then my third year of grad school, third or fourth year of grad school, I was like, I don't really want to be a chemist anymore. So I need to figure out what I'm going to do. My best friend from high school was at GW for med school, and she was like, you should be a doctor. You have all the prerequisites. I had to take an English class at a community college. And then I applied to medical school. And then in medical school, I was interested in hem-onc, which was like a lot of chemistry, a lot of biochem, a lot of pathways, and kind of similar to things that I was interested in. I did some research. I had my psychiatry rotation last because it was the way it's works out is that it's in a nice time of year, and I'm a big gardener, and I knew that you got out like half days on psychiatry, so I had psychiatry last, and I really liked it. And so then I had to kind of reevaluate what I wanted to do going forward. And then someone said to me, do what you think you'll love doing and have fun doing in 10 years. And I know I would have liked doing hem-onc, but I don't know if I would have had fun doing it. And I thought that I would have fun doing psychiatry, so that's what I did. I had to rewrite my personal statement. I had to get, all new letters of recommendations because this was like last minute. And then I ended up applying for psychiatry, and then I went to residency at Yale and fellowship for geropsych, which is an interest of mine. And now that's what I do. So that's kind of my path to mental health.
Okay, so since you're saying ladies first, Chad, I'll go ahead and chime in. I think I am the only non-F&M alum in the group. However, my private practice is 1 block away from F&M.
Right.
So hopefully I can be in the in crowd. But at any rate, yes, I appreciate Sharice inviting me. I first started out as a school counselor. I wanted to work with the youth in the school setting. And my inspiration came from my own school counselor. I was the first generation in my family to actually go to college. And so I wanted to be able to help those students who were in similar situations as me and give back. However, once I became a school counselor, I was a school counselor for 10 years. I realized that, I wasn't able to really help them in the way that I really wanted to, in terms of like all of the issues that they struggle and dealt with. I had to focus on their academics and their education and their career. And so I decided to go back and get a doctorate in counseling psychology. And through experience and working with different various mental health agencies, I said, I want to open up my own private practice, and I want to focus in on working with folks that look like me, folks that are marginalized. And so here I am. This is my 7th year in private practice. My private practice name is Diversity Works. So I'm excited to be here with you all.
Well, thank you, everyone. I guess I'm last but not least. So my interest in mental health came actually also in the midst of high school, but I didn't realize I was interested in. I always wanted to be a pediatrician since I was 5, and I saw my pediatrician had a fish tank in his office, and I said, I want one of those. So in high school, I had lots of friends who had like ADHD and depression, and I just presumed that pediatricians do those things. And so I went into that, and then some of my friends, as I talked later with them, said, there's this thing called a psychiatrist, and I had no idea what that was. So by the time I went to F&M, that's when I kind of expanded my thoughts on like really wanting to understand psychology and psychiatry. And so that's kind of where my whole process of mental health came from. I mean, just as the other ladies have talked about in terms of academics, I too had my struggles. So I was in between whether I wanted to be a psychologist and a psychiatrist myself, but felt like because of that want to be sort of this still doctor pediatrician sort of stuff, I felt comfortable continuing in that realm. So that's what led me to be a psychiatrist. All right. Question number 2. Bam. All right. So I guess, does anyone want to go first? I don't know if we should do reverse order or someone else.
Well, I think mine is the easiest answer because I didn't actually consider anything else because I really was I wasn't on the path of like psychologist, right? I never even knew what that was until I probably got to medical school. So I was on like the chemistry pre-med track inadvertently. And that's kind of, I kind of derailed myself when I thought I wanted to do something more fun, which is true. So that's my answer.
Okay. We'll let the ladies continue.
I'll go. So how did you decide between attending medical school, master's program, PhD program, or research? So in my senior year at F&M, I had the opportunity to work with Dr. Penn, who was on the panel, but we kind of lost him.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I had the opportunity to work. He was on sabbatical the first 3 years of my undergrad at F&M, but then during my senior year, he came back, and that was the first time I ever saw a Black psychologist. And so I had the opportunity to work with him. He advised my first research project at F&M, and he also encouraged me to present my research at a conference on the Association of Black Psychologists conference that summer. And so this was back in 2001. So I had the opportunity I applied for to present my research at this conference. And then I met a number of Black psychologists at that conference, and just started having conversations with people about kind of the graduate school process, whether I should apply to a master's program or a PhD. And from that conference, I met someone who was at Teachers College, Columbia University. And so I decided to apply to the PhD program in counseling psych at that time. But then I didn't actually get into the program, but I ended up getting into the master's program at TC. So I did a master's program first in 2003 for 2 years. And then from there, I decided to apply to a PhD in counseling program, and I got in the second time around. So I completed my doctorate degree at Boston College, counseling psychology program in 2011. I completed my degree. So that was my path.
Okay. We actually have a lot of similarities in terms of our path. So I attended Millersville University, the master's program in school counseling, which I knew I wanted to become a school counselor. However, I definitely did not even think that a doctorate degree was attainable. Like I said, I'm the first person in my family to even go to college. And so while there, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Dr. Rita Smith Waddell, the late Dr. Rita Smith Waddell. She actually just passed away, but actually she was a psychology professor at Millersville, and she was really, really big into AB Psy, and I too presented at a lot of the research conferences, and she was really the inspiration for me to go ahead and pursue a doctorate degree in counseling psychology. And so for me, I started out as well with a master's degree and then worked full time as a school counselor, taught adjunct teaching, and started my private practice. So I'm going to get a little bit into that later, but just juggling all three and really, really taking the time, a long time. It took me 7 years for the doctorate because I was doing so much. But yeah, so my path was a little non-traditional.
Yeah. So for me, as I said, I came into F&M with the thought of being a psychiatrist. Well, that went a little awry as I took the infamous MCATs. Well, even before that, the infamous Org Chem, for those people who have taken it, can kind of be a little daunting. And so I had to do some summer courses, and then MCATs didn't do so well either. So it made me really have to think if I wanted to continue the realm of psychologist or psychiatrist. And so I was able to do some courses on the MCATs and was able to do a little bit better. So that's how I was able to continue on the path. But, that process of making choices of whether I wanted to go into medical school or go into the master's program or PhD, a lot of it was really juggling the options that were available academically for me, and knowing that for me the end goal was always to do something psychology related, and it was just really a matter of what the path would lay out in order for me to be able to do that. And it just worked out that everything kind of moved forward in a direction that I was able to do that. I really wasn't too interested in doing research stuff. And so that's another thing that maybe kind of say, psychology isn't my thing, because I know that's something that's required a lot to move forward in it. I was really interested in really just doing the clinical right down the road with the actual patient stuff. And so that's why medical school was sort of my goal. All right. Ooh. All right. I'm going to start now. So I talked a little bit about that earlier. And I think there was sort of a few challenges for me. I'll just go into two. One was the academics. And I talked about organic chemistry tends to be a difficult thing for a lot of people. And, when I ended up doing the summer courses, I had to take both 1 and 2 at Hofstra in New York. Other people were telling me, oh man, like this is a normal thing. So that ended up kind of getting in my way a little bit. And then the same thing with the MCATs. I ended up taking it 3 times in order to get a proper score. So it was really the academics that kind of got in my way. When I actually was doing the actual field work, I loved it. I enjoyed it. People were telling me I'm doing well at it. It was just that academic stuff that got in the way educationally. In terms of sort of extraneous stuff, for those interested in med school and medicine, there's a process in your career of not just medical school, but residency and fellowship. If you're interested in doing outside of just general psychiatry. And so for me, I ended up getting into my wanted residency program, but not my wanted fellowship program. So at that time, my now ex-girlfriend wife. We started our relationship at that point. And so it was a lot of discussions about what was going to be the next steps. And so I ended up having to go to New York and do a fellowship program there because I had family there. So I just kind of stayed with my mom and we hung out for 2 years and I did the fellowship program there. But that was a difficult thing to process through, whether it would be worth continuing on this path, knowing that I have to re-examine how things work. I will say before I go on to someone else go on, you'll probably hear a lot of the things as you talk to other people about paths having to readjust after you made some assumptions about what your path is supposed to be like. And so as you're going to go forward, keep that in mind, that it's not, it's most important to recognize what you kind of want at the end rather than how you specifically get there, because few people go the route that they expected. So I'll end with that.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree with Chad on that one. Like I shared before, like I applied for several doctoral programs in the beginning, but then didn't get in. So, you know, I ended up going into a master's program at Teachers College, Columbia University. And there I met a mentor who was focused on the research that I was interested in, that I had so I was able to continue some of the work that I had started at F&M on race-related stress with this particular mentor. And this mentor, he was advised by the mentor that I then had at Boston College. So it was just kind of like, you know, full circle, right, for me. So, you know, I did a master's program for 2 years, got research experience with him, and then ended up working with his former mentor, Dr. Janet E. Helms, who does work on racial identity development. So, you know, having the opportunity to work with her was just kind of, you know, it helped me so much in my own professional and personal development. So that was kind of on the educational piece. In terms of like the career piece, one of the challenges I did face was when I was applying for pre-doctoral internships. The first time I applied, I didn't get matched. So this is kind of like the residency kind of process, but for doctoral students in psychology, it's called the pre-doctoral internship. So the first time I applied, I didn't get matched. So I had to wait another year to apply. But during that year, I was able to actually get work done on my dissertation. And so that kind of, that year helped me with, you know, to kind of get ahead of the game once I applied again for pre-doctoral internship. And then the second time I applied for pre-doctoral internship, I got matched at the University of Miami Counseling Center. And so I did my internship at the University of Miami Counseling Center. And from there, I went back to New York to do a postdoc. But then several years after I had finished my internship, they recruited me to come back down to the University of Miami Counseling Center. So I've been there for the past 6 years working as a staff psychologist. So you never know like what kind of trials and tribulations you experience along the way, how things will kind of come back and kind of be more of a blessing in disguise. So that was kind of my path.
Wow. So I'll just go ahead and chime right in because we have a lot of similarities. So I would say mentoring definitely for me was a challenge in terms of just like finding the right fit. As I mentioned, Dr. Rita Smith Waddell was definitely one of my inspirations, mentor, professor, sorority sister. And she actually helped connect me with, you had mentioned Dr. Helms. So actually, I used Dr. Helms's instrument in my dissertation, and also working with Dr. Cross and Dr. Parham. So race-related stress is definitely one of my research areas as well. So I will definitely really, really recommend finding a good mentor who can help you, and even thinking about, you know, what you're passionate about and what you want to write your dissertation on, and connecting you with the right professors in the field for whatever program you're interested in. In terms of the career, I had mentioned before, like my journey was non-traditional. So the challenge for me was just trying to balance life. You know, I was, like I said, working full time as a school counselor. I was a wife. I was a mom, teaching adjunct and opening a private practice. So yeah, it was just, life was moving full throttle. And along the way came many things that, you know, I just had, sometimes I had to take a leave of absence from school. It was just really, really difficult, which was the inspiration. I'll just kind of put a plug in for this book that I'm a co-author in, and it's How I Got Over. And this is all about the educational pursuit of Black female scholars. There's 12 of us, and we come from all disciplines: medical doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, and we just really, really, really talk about the struggles of balancing, you know, just being a Black woman and being a scholar. And so I talk about that in my chapter as well, from the projects to the professoriate. Done a little bit of everything. I taught full-time, tenure track, worked in the school systems, and now I kind of landed in private practice, which is really, really my love and my passion, and working with clients. So.
Fantastic. So I guess in terms of challenges, I think the first initial one was, you know, that D in Gen Chem, that first semester at F&M. And when you're first semester, I don't know if they still do this, they mail your grades to your parents, okay? So, yes. So that did not go over well. I promised them that will never happen again.
Right.
So I ended up reaching out to the Gen Chem professor for 2. So that was Dr. Katz, who actually kind of took me under his wing, let me kind of, you know, guided me when at some point I didn't actually need any more guidance, but I needed more help. I took Orgo, I, you know, really took to it. And so I ended up doing really well, chemistry. And then, so there was this idea about like, what am I going to do next after F&M, after college? And so I thought, I had done this National Science Foundation, a summer program while I was at F&M. And so I decided I was going to pursue a PhD in chemistry. I actually got my PhD in organic chemistry with some other sort of physics stuff related to it. And so while the person who was my mentor there was another white guy, this Polish guy, who basically treated me like I was his family, like would take picnics, was like, if you're having a bad day, he was there. It was kind of crazy. And so at some point I was like, I don't think I want to be a professor of chemistry. He's like, well, you got to figure out what you want to do. Cause you know, so and when I told him I wanted to do medicine, he was like, okay. And he supported me and, you know, really gave me the time to study for MCATs, even though I was like technically in his lab and getting paid for like research time. He, you know, I was able to use my time to do other things. I was able to go to Uganda and Kenya and do this sort of travel, medical, like pre-medical school, pre-med kind of travel experience. And he helped like fundraise for me to do that. Really fortunate in that way. And then, so I got to medical school. The first semester was very difficult for me. I think I like passed by like 1/10 of a point for 2 classes. Like it was very close. And again, I had to reevaluate, like, what am I doing here? Is this the right place for me? And I realized that my issue was that I wasn't studying the way I was supposed to be, right? I was studying like other people, doing study groups, and that's not what I need. So basically, I ended up converting all my lectures in med school to multiple choice tests, which I would give myself and take 4 to 5 times before the class, before the test.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. So at that point, when I was basically testing myself constantly, because you have to learn how to take tests. That's another thing about medicine, about a lot of testing, or life in general in America, a lot of testing. And so you have to get good at taking tests. Yeah. So at that point, I was getting really good at taking tests. And so that was used to my benefit for our steps. So medicine, you do step 1, 2, and 3. And the step 1 in particular, and step 2 is used to kind of weed you out in terms of residency. So I ended up doing pretty well in medical school. I had a mentor because I was going to be an oncologist, right? A hematologist oncologist. So I had another white male mentor who was the chair of the department. And I had to go to him and say, hey, I think I want to be a psychiatrist. And by belly, he put his hands on his belly and he was like, I don't understand. I don't understand what you're saying to me right now. It's like, yes, I know we're doing research together and you wrote my letter of recommendation already. but that's not what's happening. So it was a whole big change. He was like, I'll support you what you want to do. If you change your mind, let me know. You'll always have a place there. So I ended up pursuing psychiatry. I really loved Yale when I was on the interview trail, and I ended up matching there. I was very excited about that. And so one of the people, again, who I really resonated with, who actually went to F&M, my program director, if you go to the expo later, he'll be there. We're in the booth together for Yale Psych. So he was an F&M person, and on our interview day, we hugged. I was really about the Dr. Warbaugh and Yale program. And he was just been always incredibly supportive. And then during my time at Yale, I've done a number of things, and he's always kind of really supportive, and the other people there. So it's been a great experience for me. Mm-hmm. And then at that point, I was like, I want to be a geriatric psychiatrist, and another white male took me under his wing. And for Yale, we have a really close relationship between our residency and our fellowship. So basically, I just was like, oh, I want to do your fellowship. And he was like, okay. And so I ended up doing that. And now I'm a geriatric psychiatrist at Middlesex Hospital. I'm also the medical director of our adult outpatient services. Right. And I also do our IOP programs as well. I'm also still involved in Yale because I was so involved in the residency program when I was there. So I'm also an assistant professor, and I do a lot of different programming on kind of a lot of different things. So that's how I spend my time as well. So kind of a circuitous path, but I got lucky. I got really lucky.
Yeah, so it just sounds like everyone's had a similar trajectory of, again, the path isn't quite the beeline. It sounds like a lot of people have had mentors, which is great, and having to really work through some academic stuff and also some life lessons on trying to be able to figure out what's the best path for you. So,
absolutely.
Oh, I should say I got a divorce in residency.
Nice.
During residency, there was also that additional support that believe it or not, my program offered me. So, life really does happen.
Yes.
And we still gotta keep moving.
Yep. All right, and we got our either our second to last or last question here. What advice do you have for minority students applying to medical school or graduate school? I'll let the ladies go first again.
I'll start. So, I think you all heard a number of us mention finding mentors. I think that's one of the most important things. At least for me, that was one of the important things that kind of helped me throughout my journey. So definitely find mentors. Stay in touch with professors from undergrad if you can, because you are going to need recommendation letters, and so you don't want to be calling on your professors years down the line without having had some type of communication with them throughout your time away from undergrad, right? So if you're applying years later, right? Also, if possible, get some research experience while in undergrad. If applying to a PhD program, do your research on the faculty member that you would like to work with, and also tailor your personal statements to highlight your interest in working with that particular person, right? Because you want to be able to kind of talk about how you're going to contribute to that person's research, but also how you're going to contribute to the graduate school in general. So that would be my piece of advice.
I think there's I know there's a big thing about the hidden curriculum. I feel like there's a hidden curriculum in applying to graduate school and medical school. And some people seem to have access to it and know all the tips and tricks, and then some people don't. And I think that as minorities, sometimes we're at a disadvantage because we don't get the little ins, the tricks and trips. And then you find out later, oh, I could have done this, I could have done that, I should have done this, I should have done that. And so I think the big thing is staying connected to your fellow pre-meds, the whole group, finding out you're doing this. Oh, okay. Oh, that sounds interesting. Really finding out what people are doing so that you can think about, okay, is that something I want to do? Is that something I can use to my advantage as well? I think doing research and as an undergrad is tremendously helpful no matter what you're going to do, because you don't know where you're going to end up, right? So I was doing research at F&M. I did that National Science Foundation stuff when I was an undergrad, and I continued it again at F&M, and I used that to kind of parlay it into my, PhD for chemistry. But people still ask me about it when I was interviewing residency. So it was really important. And the big thing is a good foundation, right? Like I've been really lucky because I got really good grades after that D. And so I think that made my path a lot easier. So if you can really hunker down and really like bang out as many good grades as you can, that will make your life so much easier down the road. And then about the thing about testing, really being good at tests and figure out how you can get good at taking tests, okay? Because even for med school, you take step 1, 2, and 3. You still have to take your boards for psychiatry or whatever you do. For fellowship, you have to take another 8-hour multiple choice test. Woo-hoo. And so you have to get good at taking tests. And I see people struggle, and it's, you know, heartbreaking when someone can't complete a program, right? You can't complete residency unless you pass your steps, right? You can't complete med school until you pass your steps. And so these are parts that you just have to kind of work with and figure out what is the best way for you to learn and succeed, and what's the best way for you to test. I know it seems so strange, but that's just the way it is. And so really, if you have to get a test tutor, do that before you take it the first time, right? Getting extra help, reaching out to people who've done really well on tests to figure out what they do. You need to do that ahead of time. So you're setting yourself up for taking the test once, and you're getting an excellent, your best possible grade at that time. So that's my advice.
Absolutely. If I can just kind of ditto what pretty much both Kisha, how do you pronounce your name? Is it Marilise?
Marilise.
Marilise, yes. Marilise stated. Definitely echoing in terms of learning how to take the test. I know in my doctoral program, there was a 60% failure rate for the comps. And so it was just devastating. So again, learning how to take the test, right? That is the key, because you can take all the courses and get through, but if you don't pass that comps, you're not proceeding. So you've got to learn. Also for licensure. I know when I sat for my certified clinical mental health exam, that was just a whole nother piece. It had nothing to do with any knowledge that you learned. It was all about taking that test. So I actually took a 6-hour workshop on just how to strategically plan to take that test. And I passed. And I said, wow, I really did not apply what I learned in like 12 years of schooling. That was all about the test. So yes, I definitely did all that, because without that, guess what? You're not getting licensed. And if you're not getting licensed, you can't sit on panels. So all of that education will go to waste if you do not learn how to take that exam and pass it, more importantly. Doesn't matter by how much, as long as you pass that test. So definitely echo those sentiments, as well as this is a huge one in terms of financing. So definitely do your research. I did not pay for undergrad, grad, or doctoral programs. I had a full scholarship to Millersville University. I was on an academic scholarship for that. I then got a graduate assistantship for my master's program. So they actually paid me to go to school, and they gave me a job in counseling at the counseling center. And then for my doctorate, so the non-traditional route for me was I worked full-time in the school system, and they reimbursed. It wasn't 100%, but it was like, 90% of my doctorate degree. They reimbursed it because it was applicable to my, and I got a raise.
Right.
So definitely, because life happened, I did have to still take out loans, and my mom ended up getting not terminally, but really ill. So of course things will come along the way, and you still may have to take out loans, but if you can minimize as much as possible those student loans, that is definitely going to be key, because after all of that, you have this big, student loan that you have to pay back, let alone you're trying to live your life, you're trying to buy your house, build your career. So if you can really research those grants, those fellowships, those assistantships to help you along the way, find a job or career that's going to pay for your education and give you a raise, then that's definitely key.
That sounds like a key for life right there. Just how could I find a job that gives me a raise? So obviously I'll just echo with all these fine ladies have stated. The only things I want to add, 3 things I'm thinking about. Financially, yes, look for as many things as possible that can pay for your education, but also live within your means. I remember when I went to this panel a few when the first panel that we did, one of the gentlemen that was up commented that, you know, he knew people who, once they were a doctor, they'd living up and they'd buy their first big house and their car and all this stuff. You know, each time you work through levels, you really got to make sure you're living within your means. You know, it's not really about I'm at this level of whatever and now I can do this, that, and the other thing. I mean, look at the day and age right now that we're living in, that people had jobs of, you know, a few months ago and now they don't. So it's really important that as you're going through the process, you live within your means. While I was in residency, I lived in a studio apartment with no cable, and that was all 4 years. And I knew that's what just had to be done. So that's financially. Secondly, use time to your advantage. So whether that be, you know, some of the other ladies' incidents of having to kind of work out things between many different jobs, I try to use all my summers to my advantage, whether it be being part of a research project or doing a summer program or using that to do like a pre-med or a pre-MCAT course. Use every summer to your advantage. You do not want to miss out on any of the opportunities, as Marilise said, that like other people you know may know, and you know, you want to try to get as many different things under your belt as possible. And I guess lastly, you as a person of color are going to be one of few in most cases. So it's good to make connections with people as much as you can, but also keep in mind that some of those connections may not be a person of color and be accepting of that. And also because you may be one of very few, there's going to be a lot of internal and external pressures to succeed. Try your best to just be focused on your own capability and what you're capable of. Understand your strengths, understand your weaknesses, you know, of big mental health, understand your stressors, and really be prepared to kind of work through all those, because unfortunately in life, everything that makes you stressed out will happen. So it's just even now, yay. So it's just important to be able to keep all those things in check. And, you know, we probably talked about these things 1,000 times. If you need to exercise, if that helps you de-stress, do that. If you have people that you can talk to, you know, your local church, your friends, whoever, it's really going to be important to keep all those things in check too, because education, as important and needed as it is, can also be somewhat stressful. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. It just means be aware of how to be able to handle it. All right. I don't know if we have time for
we did like what we do for fun, so we can seem like real people.
Right.
I don't know. That's what the organizer would like us to do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hey. Go ahead. Hit
I'm
it.
just looking at the questions to see if we had anything.
Yeah. Anything else?
Oh, what do you do? Describe a typical workday. We didn't do that one.
Okay. Did you want to start that or?
No.
I love it. There you go. All right. So that was funny. Okay. So I will start. Right now I'm on paternity leave. So my typical workday is, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 8 o'clock meetings.
Oh my God.
But when I was going to work, I work inpatient unit for child and adolescent. So my typical day would start probably at 8 or 8:30. I would see a few patients, as many as I could. We do rounds at 9 o'clock on my unit. So that would be an hour to an hour and a half of rounds. And then I would see the remaining patients. I try to sort of a career lesson is trying to work out time management. It's a lesson I'm constantly learning and constantly trying to do better at. So I try to work out seeing my patients, depending on the numbers, between noon and 1 o'clock. At that point, because I'm a child doc, the next step is calling families. So, I'll spend the rest of the next few hours calling families, either calling them for the first time, for their first admission, or, calling them about any questions or concerns. I'm also part of some panels at work, so especially on peer reviews. So occasionally I'll have a meeting to have to go to as well. So that's when I just have the inpatient unit. Now, sometimes I'll also have the IOP, which is an intense outpatient program. And so in between that time, if there's less patients, I could do the IOP program. So now we're all virtual. So in the morning, it'll be all the kids on the inpatient. In the afternoon, it'll be like one or two of the new kids on the IOP program. Typically, I will leave work. That's been a struggle. When I started, I would leave work at like 5:30, 6 o'clock. My wife was so mad at me. And so it took time to really organize myself. So now it's really about trying to leave at least before 5 and get home. The biggest thing, as some of the other ladies will tell you, is really about managing your life outside too. So you got to really work out that timing. So there you go.
Yeah. For me, so I work at a university counseling center. I work primarily with undergrads and graduate students. So my day typically consists of just doing individual therapy with my clients. I also supervise interns. So I'll have like supervision meetings maybe 2 or 3 times a week. Conducting groups. I run a group at the counseling center, a group specifically for women of color called Sisters in Sharing. I also, part of the day also includes like writing notes, right? So you're making sure that you're on top of like your note keeping. And then just attending meetings too. So whether it could be staff meeting or case conferences where you discuss cases that are that you may need more support around.
Mm-hmm.
And also at the College Counseling Center, we also do outreach to like to student groups. So part of our work is just like, consulting with the campus community and talking, making sure that we're attending to like their mental health needs or what they might need in terms of programming wise. So if they want a workshop on stress management or race-related stress or test anxiety, so things of that nature. So that's kind of what my typical work week consists of. But now that we're doing work from home, I also get a chance to like in between spend time with my 9-month-old daughter. So that's been a pleasure.
Wow. So I'll chime right in. First of all, I want to say shout out to University of Miami. I have a cousin who's playing there on a scholarship for soccer. Nice. Taylor Shell, she plays there for soccer. But at any rate, my day looks very similar to yours, Kisha. I'm working from home right now, doing all telehealth. But basically, I would say for me, the big difference is, and also I want to address a question that wasn't asked. What is the one thing you wish you knew before starting your career in mental health? I think for me, the biggest thing is being an entrepreneur and being a business owner, right? Because in our programs, they teach us all about how to be a clinician. And so I was definitely prepared for that, but not prepared for everything that goes along with being your own boss, being an entrepreneur. And so for me, I feel like my day really begins as soon as I open my eyes because I'm checking emails, I'm checking voicemails. I try to schedule my clients. I try to work like a second shift because a lot of my clients need evening. But I really, like Chad stated, it's all about the time because I could really work 24. We could work around the clock 24/7, right? But that is definitely not good for our own health,
right?
Right? We don't want to experience burnout and we want to be there for a client. So yeah, for me, it's about that balance. And for you as well, as students looking into grad school, making sure that you're taking care of yourself. Self-care is definitely of the utmost importance. Being a graduate student, as well as being in this pandemic, it's like self-care, self-care, self-care. So yeah, I would definitely echo those sentiments in terms of balancing time and taking good care of yourself. And learning how, if you want to, go into private practice, learning the business end inside of things in terms of being an entrepreneur.
That's fantastic. For me, I really am very strict about my time, so I don't stay late at work ever. Like, it would have to be a ridiculous emergency for me to say, oh, I'll stay here. So I'm the medical director of our adult outpatient service. So we have 10 APRNs and MDs. We have 12 social workers, LADs, LCSWs. We have two RNs now, one MA. We've got a whole system of billing. We have about 5,000 patients under our care. And so we're a pretty busy clinic. And so I tell the people I supervise that I find that are staying late is that we don't pay overtime. And so you need to figure out how to work more efficiently. And so it's a process, but you really don't want your work life to be bleeding into your home life. I think that's a really big thing. So a typical day for me, I have to go into the office because we do telehealth from our offices. So I go into my office, I literally lock the door, and I don't come out unless I have to go to the bathroom or microwave my food, and that's it. I'm very strict about COVID. I am also in a geriatric psychiatry IOP. So Chad alluded to a day treatment program for adolescents. There's also ones for older adults as well. I'm a geriatric psychiatrist. I do not like seeing patients that are below the age of 65. That's just the way I am. I don't want to hear about some young people problems. That's just not. So I see patients basically 65. I have a 99-year-old at this point who's my oldest patient. And I have patients who pass away routinely, so that's just the nature of my job. I do that for 12 hours a week. I see patients in our outpatient clinic for another 12 hours a week, and then the rest of my time is administrative time. Running all kinds of initiatives. You would be surprised all the stuff that comes up. I do a lot of supervision. We have a lot of meetings. I also have an appointment at Yale, so I also run a class on bystander intervention and how to deal with patient mistreatment, basically, because patients will say ridiculous things to people. How do you deal with that? How do you step in? I also am serving as like a racism consultant to this place that has an issue in our at this point, so we're working on that. I also work with recruitment, screening all the applications from our URMs who apply for us for residency, kind of giving an extra look, a deep dive to make sure that we're not missing anybody on the basis of their scores or any kind of biases that might present themselves in people assessing them. And I also sit on our diversity committee at work, just have a lot of meetings and things. And then I teach, when I was in residency, I developed a class on the suicide hotline because we actually man that as PGY2s or second year residents overnight and never actually got any training about it. So I developed a curriculum around that. So I also teach that as well. So I do a lot of things. All of my teaching I do during my work time for my actual job, because when I got that job, I talked to them about the fact that I still do these things for Yale, and I'm not going to do them on my free time, and I'm not going to make up my time at work because I work during this set amount of time. So they are very flexible.
Good.
I put a block in my schedule. I have a meeting for Yale, and they're like, okay, whatever. They actually don't really keep track of it at all. So that works out really well. So that's something that I would say, setting clear boundaries. I started doing that in residency. In residency, I made Friday my administrative day. I just kept saying that to people over and over again, and people would be like, oh no, Marilise can't do that on Friday because that's her administrative day. Just keep, set a boundary and stick to it. While I was in residency, you can do lots of different initiatives and programs, but really managing your time. I was program my resident, chief of our inpatient unit at that time, and so I had a lot of things to juggle. Again, I never, ever stay late unless it's like an actual patient emergency. People will try to encroach on your time. People will send you an email at 5 o'clock and be like, oh, you didn't get back to me. Oh, because you sent me an email at 5 o'clock. I stopped at 4:30. You'll hear my response back at 8 o'clock. So if you set that boundary, people will respect that. If you let people encroach, they will happily take from you. And so it's important to keep that in mind. So that's my biggest advice. If you're going to set a boundary, try to keep it. People will try to push it, but it's really important for you because you're the person who's going to look out for you the most. No one's going to care that you need to go to bed at 9 o'clock every night, right? Or you need 10 hours of sleep. Nobody cares about that. Or you need to exercise, but you need to care about yourself, and that's how you're going to do that. So
True
that's
that.
my
Bam.
I'm really strict. Doesn't want to play with with I have a 17-month-old daughter. I want to play with my dog. You know, like I don't want to work. I want to be at home hanging out. So.
Yeah.
All right. It's 11:01. I don't know how many other things. I see a comment there from Susan, 100%. So many good pointers in the last few minutes. I didn't know whether our organizer has anything else we need to say or goodbye. I don't,
We could do a Zoom wave.
I know.
Alrighty. Well,
Thank
nice
you,
to see you all.
All right. Bye. Have a good rest of the
Bye. Yes,
weekend.
you all too.
Yes. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.